Alright, well I've got a pretty common issue with Jeeps called death wobble. Happens to hit at a particular speed, just shy of 45-ish. See the wheel dancing all over the place there. Definitely a pull to the right as well. I think it's possible that this tie rod end here on the passenger side could be allowing my alignment to go out while I'm driving. And that could be causing both my wobble and my right pull. First up is going to be removing the steering stabilizer. It's a 50-50 balance shock that keeps that wobble out of your steering. It connects the drag link to the axle. Little bit. There we go. So I've got one end of the steering stabilizer removed. And as you can see, the other end of the stabilizer is a little bit hidden behind the steering gear. I'm just going to go ahead and leave it bolted on there until I get everything else off. Next thing we got to do is remove all of these castle nuts here. As you can tell, there's not a whole lot of torque on them. Just need one quick pull and they should come right off.
Leave the nut on to keep from damaging the threads while knocking out the tie rod end. This will also help avoid damaging your wheels when the tie rod end drops out, allowing you to control where it swings. This tie rod end was so loose I had to put pressure on the bolt with a lever to get the nut off. Otherwise it just spun in place.
If your drag link is as old as mine and has been tightened as much as mine, it's probably not going to want to come out of the pitman arm. So you're going to need one of these.
This is a Harbor Freight slide hammer with a double claw attachment. It comes in handy when you need it, but it's a pain to use. Quick tip here, if you apply anti-seize to the shaft of the ball joint, it'll be a lot easier to take out in the future. They don't do it at the factory, and that's why it was so hard to get my drag link out.
I can definitely tell you that that was not easy. You're going to spend a lot of time doing it if your Jeep has 100,000 miles on it like mine does. And that you are going to get very angry and probably need to take a break in the middle. Other than that, success. So here's the comparison between the Crown Automotive kit and the OEM TJ kit.
On one side, you've got a very beefy fixed tie rod end. On the opposite side, you've got a much beefier threaded tie rod end that's the same as the ZJ V8 setup. It's also got the ZJ V8 adjuster. Though there are a few small differences, the drag links are pretty much the same. Matching the links of your new tie rod and drag link to your old ones is going to make installation and alignment a lot easier. When I first started having death wobble, it was so violent it'd run me off the road. So I bought this Kevin's off-road shock, which is supposed to be much heavier duty than the stock shock. This time around, I went ahead and bought a Bilstein because it's cheaper and it gets good reviews. My wobble's a lot more minor now, and honestly, the Kevin's off-road shock didn't seem to last much longer than stock.
Just a quick note when you attach your drag link that this adjuster should be on the pitman arm side. Now the old Kevin's off-road steering stabilizer just came with a bolt, and that always kind of bothered me because it actually is a tapered fitting. I got a brand new drag link now, so I don't have to worry about drilling it out or messing with it. I can just install the proper hardware. You cannot reuse the old hardware from your factory steering stabilizer because it's permanently attached.
Use Loctite on the top, don't use it on the bottom.
If you're doing your own alignment at home and you don't have help, you're going to need two things. 1, a tape measure. 2, a point on your tire tread that is identical on either side and on front and back. This is where you set your alignment on your tie rod.
Stretch the tape measure between those 2 points on the front of your tires as level as you can. Here we've got about a 66-inch distance. Then you do the same thing between the same 2 points on the back side of your tire. Here we've got about a 66 and a 16th to a 66 and an 1/8 difference, which is pretty close to what you need.
Now I'm 1/8 of an inch towed in. That's about what they recommend. I've of course messed with this for a little while. Even though I matched my tie rods up to each other, they were still off by about an inch. Once you set your toe in, you tighten these two clamps down to tool tight. You really don't need to torque these like crazy, just enough to keep this from being able to move. This adjuster on your drag link is how you're going to straighten your steering wheel. Once you've done your poor man's alignment, you're going to need to set your steering wheel straight again. A roll of tape helps. My steering wheel is canted to the left a little bit. Once again, I set the drag link next to the old one, tried to align them as closely as possible, but as you can see, it's a little bit off. It really doesn't take much.
After glancing through your windshield and checking to make sure the tape is nice and centered, you're going to want to go ahead and tighten the clamps down on your adjuster.
So, next thing you're going to want to do is make sure nothing contacts. So we've got total clearance on the diff cover. These bolts don't seem to contact anything. Now check the other side, clear here. Nothing's rubbing. Diff cover's clean. Everything's clear here. Don't forget to grease all of your bushings. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 on the end. Once you see that little boot inflate, that's more than enough grease. 2 of the Crown Automotive Zerk fittings weren't fully threaded in, so be sure to check that. And this one wouldn't accept grease until I wiggled the steering back and forth to free up the joint a little bit. All the joints come with factory grease on them, but you should definitely add a little bit of your own just to make sure that everything is lubed up properly. You don't need to add too much. You'll end up attracting a lot of dirt to the joint if it's running out from under the boot or caked all around the Zerk fitting. So keep it clean, don't overpack it. So that's it. We're done with the install portion.
Here's every tool I used to replace the steering setup. The blue Loctite was only used on the stabilizer.
So the ultimate question is, did I solve my problem? Sure feels like it. I might be just masking the problems, but I know for a fact that my bushings were worn and my steering stabilizer had at least 35,000 miles on it, and it was time for a new one. The Crown Automotive Steering Kit is an inexpensive way to solve your steering problems and get an upgraded linkage. And the Bilstein steering stabilizer is better than stock. All in all, I think I solved my problem, and I can finally get back to using this Jeep for what it's meant for.